The strange situation is the first attachment assessment ever developed. I say is because it is still being used today by developmental attachment researchers. Developed by John Bowlby's researcher, Mary Ainsworth, the strange situation was the first experiment to identify the disparate ways that the human attachment system responds to distress. You may know these as attachment styles, but as I like to point out on this channel, that's not quite correct. Hello and welcome to Attachment Maps. My name is Carl and I've been learning about attachment theory since 2018. I'm here to tell you things no one else is talking about. If you're not familiar with the strange situation, it goes something like this. An infant and a caregiver, usually the mother, are placed in a room with a one-way mirror so that researchers can observe. Toys are available for the infant to play with, and a stranger is introduced into the room at specific times. When cued, the caregiver leaves the infant behind in the room and then returns. Researchers pay close attention to how the infant responds to separation, but especially how the infant responds when the caregiver returns. And just so you know, these are not standalone assessments. These assessments were often preceded by a year of home observation. And to be clear, the strange situation, unlike most attachment assessments, looks purely at behavior. The intentions and mental representations had to be assumed, and this was later backed up by assessments like the adult attachment interview. So let's take a look at the different ways infants respond, starting with the secure pattern. Known as secure and denoted by the B classification, these infants are comfortable playing with the toys, are distressed by the caregiver's departure, actively greet the caregiver and initiate contact, and are effectively soothed by the caregiver's return. For secure infants, play is an indicator that they feel safe to explore when their caregiver is around. In Bowlby's words, the caregiver is providing a secure base for safe exploration. When the stranger enters, the secure infant may become a little wary, but is generally okay with them. But when the caregiver leaves, they're honest about their distress and they cry. And when the caregiver returns, the secure infant seeks that person out. They want to be held. And once they're held, once they're settled, they go back to play and exploration. What that reunion behavior reflects is something subtle and important. These infants expect to be comforted and they can receive it. Now let's go to pattern A, avoidant attachment. Originally, infants with avoidant attachment seemed really well adjusted. They didn't cry when their caregiver left the room. They didn't show much visible distress at all. They seemed fine. They just kept playing. But when researchers later measured skin conductance and cortisol levels, they found that these avoidant infants actually showed signs of physiological distress. They just weren't consciously aware of it. So we can surmise that this is an attachment strategy based in denial, based on the shutdown of the attachment system, and one in which the focus remains on toys and exploration. That is, material things, tools, gadgets, machines, and exploration of the external world rather than a focus on internal exploration, relationships, and emotion. And when the caregiver returns, nothing happens. No comfort is sought and none is given. But let's not forget that this strategy achieves a purpose: to maintain proximity to a caregiver who is more available when the child isn't too needy. The child is still oriented towards the parent. The child still wants connection. The behavior has just been reorganized around the caregiver's particular sensitivities. So avoidant infants still want proximity. They just have an indirect, nonchalant way of showing it. As a side note, it's really interesting that the avoidant infant was the most angry in home observations. They seem to tone down their anger in the laboratory setting. Now, let's talk about the attachment pattern you might know as anxious. This is the C infant classification. But researchers didn't originally call these kids anxious. They called them resistant, angry, and ambivalent. Contrary to all the oversimplified reductionist models that say anxious attachers just yearn for closeness, they just want intimacy. They just need a secure partner who will reassure them, and then they'll spontaneously heal. Wrong. These infants were already wary and distressed before the caregiver even left. Their play or exploration was minimal. They were preoccupied with their caregiver and seemed angry or passive when the caregiver was present. When the caregiver left, they became distressed. But when the caregiver returned, the infant failed to settle or take comfort in the caregiver. They continued to cry. They wanted the caregiver to hold them while pushing away the caregiver at the same time. They continue to focus on the caregiver and never have much interest in play or exploration. This is an attachment that says, I don't trust you to be there for me consistently. I'm going to be hypervigilant. I'm worried that you will leave, and even when you come back, I will be resentful that you left. I will protest and complain because the only hope for you being consistent and getting your attention is me constantly being on your case about it. Now we come to pattern D, disorganized or disoriented attachment. This one wasn't in Ainsworth's original classification system. It was added later in the 1980s by Mary Ainsworth and Judith Solomon when they reviewed the videos and saw that some infants displayed peculiar disorganized behavior along with their otherwise organized A, B, or C behavior. Let me emphasize that. These infants were classified into the 3 categories of attachment. The reason a 4th category was created is only because some of these infants' behavior was punctuated with disoriented actions. It's what is considered a temporary collapse of behavioral strategies. And whether it's the strange situation or the adult attachment interview, a disorganized classification always has a secondary classification of one of the 3 original categories. Disorganized attachment was never meant to be just another full attachment pattern. Disorganized infants, during reunion with the caregiver, may show contradictory behaviors in rapid sequence. They approach, then freeze mid-stride. They cry and reach out, then fall to the floor. They may cling while crying hard and leaning away with gaze averted. They enter a kind of trance-like stillness. Sometimes they seem to be moving in 2 directions simultaneously. Sometimes they put their hands in the air or cover their mouth with their hand. Manin has proposed what became an influential explanation. In pattern D cases, the caregiver is also the source of fear. This doesn't require abuse necessarily, though abuse is certainly one pathway. A caregiver who is themselves frightened, for instance, can be enough. A caregiver who dissociates or who behaves in ways that are unpredictable and alarming without being intentionally harmful. The result is what Manin has called a paradox with no solution. The child's attachment system, when activated by threat, drives them towards the caregiver, but the caregiver is the threat, or behaves like one, or behaves in ways that activate fear in the child alongside the pull towards closeness. The system that is supposed to organize behavior, approach the safe person, get regulated, return to exploration, cannot resolve. It generates contradictory impulses simultaneously. The result is behavioral disorganization. The strange situation is a simple procedure that works because it activates the attachment system. The assessment shows us in real time what separation anxiety, proximity seeking, secure base, and safe haven behaviors look like. Infants are not passive recipients of care. They are active theorists. They are running experiments on their caregivers from very early on, and the conclusions they draw this person is reliably there, or this person pulls away when I'm needy, or this person is sometimes there and sometimes not, shape how they organize their attachment behavior. That organization is not a flaw, it's an adaptation. Thanks for watching, and see you next time.